Hi, and welcome to One Life Matters, the podcast that reminds you that your life is worth living with purpose, joy, and authenticity. I'm Trish, a counsellor and life coach, and I'll be sharing down-to-earth conversations, insights, and tools to help you navigate the ups and downs of life. Whether you're healing from the past, finding your confidence, or simply wanting to feel more at peace with yourself, this is your space. Because you only get one life and it truly matters. Just before we get into this episode, I just want to mention that this podcast is for general information, insight, and reflection only. It's not a substitute for personal therapy, counselling, or medical advice. Imagine someone living in your head who's constantly sabotaging your best moves just to keep themselves safe. They've been calling the shots since you were a toddler, and frankly, they've made a mess of the place. Today, we're going to call out the squatter in your psyche, and I'm talking about the ego. Now, before you think, oh, I don't have a big ego, I'm actually quite humble. Let me stop you right there. We aren't talking about being arrogant or full of yourself like Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter. You remember him, right? The guy who spent his entire life writing books about his legendary achievements, when in reality, he hadn't done a single one of them. He was flashy, he was vain, and he was, well, let's be honest, a bit of a knob. But why was he like that? Because if we look past the gold-trimmed robes and the blindingly white smile, he was terrified of being ordinary. His ego was a massive glittering fortress built to hide the fact that he felt like he wasn't enough. He's got what we call the loud ego, the one that performs and brags to keep the world from seeing its insecurities. Now, most of us aren't Gilderoy Lockharts, although I'm sure we all know a few. We don't walk around with a cape and a fan club. Our ego is much sneakier. Instead of saying, "Look how great I am," our ego says, "Don't let them look at you at all, because they'll see you're a fraud." And while Lockhart used his ego to manufacture a fake life, most of us use ours to stop us from living our real life. It's the same root, the fear of not being enough. It just wears a different outfit. Lockhart's ego wanted him to be a hero. But this episode is for those of you whose ego would much prefer you to stay invisible so you don't get hurt, humiliated, or shamed. I'm talking about the quiet ego, the one that waits until the world goes silent at 2 a.m. to start its highlight reel of your biggest failures. It's that internal voice asking, "Are you sure you didn't sound like an idiot in that meeting?" Or, "Why did you laugh like that?" And then there's the classic, "They're definitely going to realise you're a fraud tomorrow." It's the ultimate confidence cock blocker because it thrives on your hesitation. And if you're sitting there thinking, "My ego isn't that loud," congratulations, that's your ego talking, and you're exactly the person who needs to hear this. So in this episode, I'm going to explore what the ego actually is and try to normalise it. I want to talk about the biggest trick the ego ever played, convincing you that inaction is a safety net. The ego tries to convince you that if you don't try, you can't fail. And if you don't fail, you're safe. We think we're being protected by our hesitation, but here's the reality. That protection is actually a cage. So ego doesn't always look like overconfidence. In fact, most of the time, it shows up as self-doubt. It makes you second-guess your dreams until they feel small enough to fit inside your comfort zone. We turn our backs on potentially wonderful opportunities because we've been conned into believing that the sting of failure is worse than the slow ache of never knowing what might have been. There's a powerful quote by Daniel Chidiak in his book, Stop Letting Everything Affect You. He says, "The ego would rather let you live with the regret of not trying than with the temporary sting of trying and failing." Just think about that for a second. Your ego is literally choosing long-term regret over short-term discomfort. It's like staying in the wrong relationship because the breakup feels unbearable and therefore choosing a lifetime of quiet unhappiness and resentment over a season of pain. We've been conditioned by society, by our upbringing, by our own fears to believe that being safe is the same thing as being okay. But safety is just the absence of threat. It isn't the presence of joy. So I want to ask you the same question I had to ask myself when I was staring at my recording equipment, too afraid to press start. Do you want to live a protected life or a fulfilled one? Because sometimes you can't have both. Fulfillment requires you to step into the unknown. It requires you to tell your ego, I know you're worried about the sting of failing, but I'm more worried about the weight of regret. It isn't bad and it isn't wrong, and you aren't a broken person for having one. It's actually trying to be your mate. It's just a very overprotective, slightly neurotic bestie. We're going to talk about why it shrinks your self-belief, how it's kept me from doing this very podcast for way too long, and how we can finally take the microphone back. So how does this show up in your day-to-day? Because the ego is sneaky. It doesn't usually say, I'm shit scared. It uses more sensible disguises such as perfectionism. If it can't be perfect, I won't start. Why? Because if it's perfect, nobody can criticize you. If you never finish it, nobody can judge it. Perfectionism is just a suit of armor that's become so heavy, you can't move. Then there's procrastination. We tell ourselves, I'll do it later when I'm better prepared, or after I've watched Landman. But that's just the ego saying, I'll do it when I feel more confident. But here's a newsflash. Confidence comes after the doing. The ego uses procrastination to keep you in the safety of the planning phase when nothing can go wrong. Oh, and what about comparison? The compare and despair dilemma. The ego loves the leaderboard. Everyone else is doing so much better than me, so why even try? It uses other people's success as a reason for you to stay small and safe in the shadows. And let's not forget good old overthinking. What if I say the wrong thing? What if they think I'm a fraud or make myself look stupid? This is just your nervous system on a loop, trying to scan for exits before you've even entered the room. Your ego would rather you stay stuck than risk being seen, because being seen is vulnerable, and to the ego, vulnerability equals danger. You know, this podcast, well, it almost didn't happen. I knew I wanted to do a podcast for, well, longer than I care to admit, for years. And my ego had a field day with it. It didn't sound like a big scary monster. It sounded like a very responsible accountant. It told me, you're not ready yet. You need a better microphone. I actually ended up buying 3. There's already a million podcasts. Who needs yours? And what if you run out of things to say by episode 3 and everyone sees you've failed? It sounded so logical. It sounded like it was looking out for my professional reputation and my personal pride. But if I peel back the layers, it wasn't about the microphone or the podcast saturation. Underneath it all, I was terrified of being heard. I was terrified of getting it wrong. I was operating on an old childhood belief that if I wasn't the best at something immediately, I shouldn't be doing it at all. My ego wasn't lazy or unmotivated. It was terrified. And if you're sitting there with a dream, a business, a hobby, a difficult conversation you need to have, and you're waiting for the right time, I want you to ask yourself, is it really a bad time? Or is your security guard just refusing to unlock the door? So let's strip away the jargon. In the world of psychology, people get very heady about the ego. So let's look at it through a more down-to-earth lens. Think of your ego as your internal security guard. Its entire job is to protect you from 3 things: threat, shame, and rejection. It's hardwired directly into your nervous system. Back in the day, a threat was a saber-toothed tiger. Today, a threat is a negative comment on Instagram, or maybe a presentation at work where you might embarrass yourself. Your ego developed early. When you were a kid, you were a sponge. You learned the rules of your world to stay safe and loved. You might have learned, don't stand out too much or people will pick on you. Don't fail or your parents will be disappointed. Don't speak up unless you're 100% sure you're right. The ego's job is to maintain familiarity, which it loves because it sees familiarity as safe. Even if you're miserable in your current situation, your ego prefers that familiar discomfort over the scary unknown of growth. But here's the big reframe for today, and I want you to really hear this. The ego isn't trying to ruin your life. It's literally trying to keep you alive. It just doesn't know the difference between a social awkwardness and a life-threatening emergency. So what do? We can't kill the ego. It's part of being human. It helps us navigate daily life, make sense of who we are, and interact with the world around us. But we can change our relationship with it. We just need to stop letting it run our lives. So here's a few tips on how to do that. Name the ego. When that voice starts up, say out loud, there's my ego trying to protect me again. This creates a tiny bit of space between you and the voice. Try to think of it as you are the sky and the ego is just a very grumpy cloud passing through. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's what I said. I know this sounds weird, but try it. Say, I know you're trying to keep me safe from failing or embarrassment, but I'm okay. Honestly, it reduces the internal friction and in a way decommissions it. Take nervous system safe steps. Don't try to change your whole life in a day. That will send your ego into a full-blown panic attack. Take tiny steps. So if you want to start that podcast, instead of launching straight into a show, just record yourself talking into your phone for a couple of minutes while you're making coffee. The one-sentence post. Forget the long, perfect caption. Just post one photo or one thought. How about the micro move? Send that one email you've been avoiding. Don't overthink it. Don't proofread it 5 times. Just hit send. What about the 30-second rule? Next time you're in a meeting or a conversation, speak up for just 30 seconds before your brain has time to tell you why you shouldn't. And choose curiosity over criticism. Instead of saying, why am I like this? Ask, what am I afraid of right now? What do I need to do to feel okay? Now, as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this. The ego never really disappears. As you grow, the ego just finds new things to worry about. The growth isn't about becoming fearless or silencing that voice forever. You don't need to silence your ego to move forward. You just need to stop letting it hold that microphone. And before I let you go today, I want to leave you with a tiny 5-minute exercise. You can do this while you're driving, washing the dishes, or just sitting in your car before you head into the house. I call it the protection audit. I want you to think of one thing, just one, that you've been protecting yourself from doing. Maybe it's a hobby you haven't started yet, a boundary you haven't set yet, or a podcast you want to start. Now ask yourself these 3 questions. What's the sting? If you tried and it didn't work out, what's the temporary sting your ego is afraid of? Is it embarrassment? A moment of feeling silly? A lack of self-belief? Name it. And what's the weight? If you stay exactly where you are for another year, what is the weight of that regret going to feel like? How heavy does what if feel compared to that temporary sting? And thirdly, the safe step. What is one tiny move you can take this week that is so small your ego doesn't even bother to ring the alarm? If you want to write a book, don't write a chapter, just open a blank document and title it. If you want to start a podcast, maybe do as I did and just record a short voice note on your phone talking about your day. Your ego is going to tell you that the unknown is dangerous, but I promise you the most dangerous place to be is stuck in a protected life that doesn't fit you anymore. Why not choose a bit of bravery and faith over the sting? And I promise that I'll be right here with you, microphone in hand, doing exactly the same. Thank you for joining me on One Life Matters. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love you to subscribe and maybe share it with someone who might need it too. And remember, you only get one life, so make it one that truly matters. Until next time, take care of yourself.